Hello, and welcome to the SharePoint Framework at JavaScript Biweekly Sync. It is October 7th, 2021. Welcome to the call. I'm your host, Patrick Rodgers, and we have a great agenda for you as always. We'll run through patterns and practices, program updates, new community samples. We'll do our fun picture time. And then we'll get into 3 demos from Dippin, Hallo, and Hugo. So very excited to see and get to those. But first, a few quick updates. Opportunities to participate in patterns and practices. We always, of course, encourage and welcome you to do demos on these calls. So if you have, for this call, we try and focus on SharePoint Framework or JavaScript related, client-side script related, or at PnP program related things. So reach out, of course, to us. We'll get you scheduled on a call. It might not necessarily be the next call. Sometimes we're booked out a little bit, but we will get you on a call. We love the demos and want to thank everybody that's done them and encourage you to share some of the work you're doing for your companies and your customers as appropriate. Love to have those demos. I think it's the best part of the call. I always learn something new from the way folks are tackling problems. We will always also encourage you to contribute on GitHub. You can report issues, submit pull requests, and of course, help others with any issues or questions they might have. And then as well, feedback. We really appreciate the feedback folks give us, how things are going, how can we improve the calls. Our new call schedule that we kind of started after the summer here is a direct result of some of the feedback we got over the last year about how the number of calls were a bit much or a bit confusing. So we've tried to simplify that. So we really appreciate the feedback. Sometimes it takes a bit of time, but we do try and act on it. And of course, positive feedback is okay too. You can always let us know if we're doing something well, and perhaps we could do a little bit more of it. Now we got our Slido links. So we've got developer videos on YouTube. These are topic-focused videos that will bring you information on performing different tasks. So perhaps making a new web part, doing authentication. There's videos around provisioning, lots of great content there. So those developer-focused videos. As well, we have the community videos. Those are going to be the recordings of some of our events, our calls such as this one, as well as other things that might get recorded and posted up there from the community. So that's a great way to catch up. If you're not able to attend any of the calls live, they'll all make it up there on YouTube, so you can catch up with them at your leisure. As well, we have a bunch of open source organizations. SharePoint, PnP, Office Dev, and Microsoft Graph are all available to you for various things, SDKs, learning resources, places to report issues. And as well, all of those places are looking for your contributions as well. If you're interested in working on the Microsoft Graph, they would love to have folks helping out with their SDKs and code generation. They're doing a lot of really cool work there now towards the V4 stuff they're working on. It's really neat to see. So if you're into that, certainly check that out. And as well, the other repos all are interested in your participation too, if you have interest. Sample galleries, we have tons of samples for Teams, SPFx Power Platform, SPFx extensions, as well as list formatting. Those are great places to learn, and it's often where I go to check out how others have solved problems when I'm getting started thinking about something. So I encourage you to do the same. It's really a fantastic resource for the community, built by the community. And so thank you to all of you, and I encourage you to check it out. That's a lot of links, so do check out ak.ms/m365pnp. That'll actually get you to all of those links and all of the content from the Patterns and Practices program. So I encourage you to check that out. Next up is some info about our ongoing Tuesday calls. So this is Microsoft 365 platform calls. This is the latest news from Microsoft Engineering, and as well as demos. Next week, the 12th of October, that's Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific, we'll have Andre and Bob doing 2 demos on progressive web apps and beyond. And Bob will be doing hands-on with Microsoft Graph file uploads and downloads. So 2 great demos, as well as lots of great news and updates around Microsoft 365. So check those out. You can download the invite there at that link. And it's another great call for the community, and hope you can check that out. As well, we're supporting Hacktoberfest across the Patterns and Practices organization. This is something put on, I believe it's put on by DigitalOcean, since that's their link there. I think they're the sort of overriding organizer. But register today, so it runs for the month of October. Pull requests are submitted to any PnP GitHub repository labeled with Hacktoberfest. Submit 4 pull requests in the month of October, and you'll get a shirt for the first 55,000 people that do that. And look for, certain things are tagged in the repos. Good first issue, help wanted is a great way to find stuff to work on. And as well, if you're unsure how to get started, we do encourage you to check out the Sharing is Caring sessions. They have first-time contributor sessions. I know David's going to talk about that in a second, but those are really a great way to get started and learn if you're sort of new to GitHub or new to open source participation. Now, this is Sharing is Caring with David.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. And as he mentioned, these are sessions that are going to walk you through hands-on getting involved in the community. Getting involved could mean utilizing the resources available, like those SPFx samples, seeing how you can use them in your organization to learn from them. Getting involved could mean contributing back if you want to update those samples or you'd like to get more involved in giving back to the community, but you're not sure where to get started or how to overcome the hurdles that may be preventing you, like how to use GitHub. These sessions will walk you through in a safe space, inclusive opportunity, all hands-on, all free of charge. They're not recorded, and we're going to do all of that together. Our newest session, Power Platform Samples, First-Time Contributor, is coming up later this month. We have the ever-popular AMAs with PnP PowerShell scheduled for October 26th, and we've got some announcements today around PnPjs that we will also be scheduling an AMA to go over in the near future as well. As Patrick mentioned, these sessions that are inclusive of GitHub, like first-time contributors, like community docs, like Power Platform Samples, they do count towards the Hacktoberfest. So get registered and register for any of these, aka.ms/sharing-is-caring. Now, as we move to the next slide, once you do contribute back, we love to celebrate the amazing work that you're doing, and so the recognition program is here to do just that. We have partnered with Credly, which is the same Credly that does all of the badging for certifications. So your badges in the recognition program will sit right next to those. We've got a lot of badges in progress. We're working on one for Hacktoberfest, the Power Platform independent publishers, connectors. We've got the authors, so many coming soon, lots of fun campaigns. Get involved. We do need you to opt in, aka.ms/m365pnp-recognition. Patrick, back to you.
Awesome. Great updates. Thank you, David, as always. And thank you to everybody that's participated in PnP as well as the Sharing is Caring sessions. It's a really wonderful resource for folks looking to learn or get some additional guidance. And with this, we'll hand things over to Vesa for SharePoint Framework updates.
Excellent. So quick update on the SharePoint Framework 1.13, intended to go live, I would say, still in upcoming weeks. We are close to saying upcoming days, but will not be next week. So, okay, so it's happening relatively soon. It's going to be a Tuesday, so relatively soon. Anyway, one of the key, some of the key changes here is that there will not be anymore a local workbench. We deprecated that in 1.13, 1.12. There's going to be updates on the supportability of TypeScript, Themes.js, and all of that stuff. And there's going to be a cool, really image rendering APIs updates as well, which are optimizing always to use the CD empaths for your images as well, if that's possible. So there's a lot of cool stuff over there. Primary thing being the Viva Connections extensibility support. So ACEs is going to be there available. One of the cool things in this release will be also this one. So we've got a lot of feedback related on the lack of Microsoft Teams or development for localhost, and it's been hard to do development of Microsoft Teams extensibility with SharePoint Framework because of the lack of localhost loading easily. So as part of the 1.13, there's going to be an initial version of this. It will not be necessarily super polished, but you can already basically host and do development inside of Microsoft Teams from a local host. So you can do you can do debugging and all of that stuff super easily as part of this. As said, the first experience will be a bit rough. We're going to document the whole thing, and we're going to make it easier and easier in the future. We're working with, for example, with the Teams tool V2 people to make this integrated in their stuff sooner or later. Then what happens after the 1.13? There's going to be performance improvements across the app. So dev and runtime, basically meaning the runtime. Well, we modify things and optimize a lot of the stuff on the server side as well. Team store support for partnership SharePoint Framework solutions. So you can target the Team store in the app stores, even though your solution is using SharePoint Framework. Widely requested capability. There's a new app catalog experience in plans. So we're modernizing all of that. New Yeoman templates, better solution metadata, and then enable service principal registration is something new also, which I can briefly do a preview and explain a preview, which basically means that If you have a SPFx solution which is dependent on an API which is hosted in Azure, currently there's no easy way of automating that consent as you are updating the solution into App Catalog. So we're looking into making that as a super polished experience, so you can actually point to a URL in the solution file so that the end user administrator will be redirected there to consent to API, and after that you can easily call the API within your solution. So really streamlining that experience as well. But that's a quick preview on what's coming on the SPFx in the future. Much more stuff, obviously, in the pipeline, which we can't yet talk about, but cool stuff. Let's move forward.
Awesome stuff. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can't wait to see those updates get out. Can't wait to see 1.13 live. And now PnPjs updates with Julie.
Hey, so you can see we have a change to the slide because we have a big announcement today. As of today, you can try out our version 3 early preview. We have started creating nightly builds, and so you can install our nightly build using the command you find there on the screen. And if you check out that pinned issue 1636, which we've been referencing all along, we have documented some getting started instructions for adding it to the SharePoint framework or for using it in Node. There are some bits of work that you need to do to make it work because we have upgraded our code base significantly. So definitely check out those instructions. A bunch of us have run through it and everything seems to be working great, but certainly submit an issue if you have any problems or find any significant bugs. It is pretty rough, but so it's definitely not production ready, but absolutely please check it out and give us your feedback. And also all the changes, the major changes for V3 from V2 are in the V3 branches changelog. And yes, I'm wearing the sort of ugly build sweater. We've been announcing that all along, and Julie just figured that out yesterday because I don't read the slides. So anyway, direct all your feedback to the issues list as normal, and please follow us M365 PnPjs on Twitter to keep up to date with what's happening. Thank you. Back to you, Patrick.
Great stuff. I'm very excited about this. Julie's done a ton of great work with the team on creating this V3 version. So I hope everybody can try it out and let us know your feedback. I'm just watching the rabbit video, which gets more and more involved each week. But thank you to Julie. Thank you to everybody that's helped out with V3. I'm very excited for everybody to try it out. I think there's a lot of great stuff there. Lots more documentation coming. You're going to look at that issue and be like, hey, man, that's not a lot. But we'll have more documentation coming. So thank you to everybody there. And now the biggest announcement today from Waldeck.
No, it's going to be me.
No. Albert,
Ooh.
Okay.
So we released V4 today, which is really big milestone for us. Really cool. Some breaking changes in V4. We changed a bunch of commands. We changed the way we process group members. We changed quite a lot of commands where the default output is now set to JSON. We removed some stuff in there, so the value wrapper is changed in some of the commands that we had. We had some duplication that we fixed. We removed obsolete file paths. So for us, really big milestone, really happy with it. Definitely try it out. And we wrote some upgrade guidance. So if you are looking at upgrading, we got you covered and everything should be in the docs. That's it.
That's not it. It's an amazing new version. So I'm encouraging everybody to try that out. Really fantastic to see the CLI continue to grow. The community has really supported this and helped build this. Lots and lots of contributors to this. It's fantastic to see this get to V4. So great work to the team. Try it out. Let them know what you think. Just wonderful stuff here. So congrats on the V4 release. Really good stuff. So thank you to everybody there. And poor Gary had to move houses just to manage all the awesome that's in the CLI now. Moving on then to the reusable controls. Not a lot of announcements here other than to note that these are going to be the last major releases of the V2 branch for the controls. So 2.9.0 and 2.7.0. Moving forward, the guidance would be to update then your solutions to SPFx 1.12.1 or above and the V3 branch of the controls. So just want to note that for everyone, as well as to, of course, thank everybody that continues to contribute to the controls, another of our valuable community resources. And with that, we will move on to samples with Hugo.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. So I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but we have sample repositories for web parts and extensions. And we got more stuff coming up soon, but I'll let David talk about that later. So if you're looking for samples with web parts, if you want to just learn a minor pattern, or you want to see almost a full-fledged solution you can leverage, you can go to ak.ms/spfx-webparts or ak.ms/spfx-extensions. So here's some of the updates that we've received over the last 2 weeks. There's actually more, but I wasn't able to process them in time. I will be processing them, and you will get credit for the next call. So My Flows List by Adam, that actually allows you to see the status of your ongoing flows against the list, which is an awesome extension. I recommend you go play with that. We also have updates to the SharePoint CRUD operations web part, where it's been updated to SPFx 1.12.1. We have the new Graph Group Viewer by Zach Roberts, and it actually allows you to search for groups in your tenant, and allows you to view the details of the groups, and as well as the group members, and export the list to a CSV. And like all web parts that Zach does, it really looks professional and it's fully featured. Nandeep Nachan updated the questionnaire Teams meeting app. If you haven't tried Meetings app in Teams, it's a great way to add extensive functionality inside of a meeting in Teams, and it's all built in SPFx. We have the updated accordion plugin web part by Frederick. He added the sorting fix, and Mohammed Amar. It actually allows you, it's an improved year view and highlights today's style. And then we have the multi-screen web part by Ari Gunawan that I forgot to put a description for it, but it's a cool web part. So that's it for me. Back to you, Patrick.
But wait, is it all for you? Because there's another slide here on PnP SPFx ACES.
Yes, I figured David and I were exchanging messages in the back. David's going to take care of that one.
Oh, well, David, back to you.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, well, this is one of the newest repositories for us in the PnP umbrella. It's super exciting. A Viva Adaptive Card Extensions repository, or as we know them to be, ACEs. And so we've already started getting some new samples put in here. There's a couple that are put in by Dipin Shah, Create Teams and Manage Team. We're going to see one of those demoed today, actually. There's another one very cool around planner tasks by Ijaz Hussain, very, very slick. And Anoop Tati has been busy. 3 tenant service health, articles at a glance, London transport service status, and we've got a couple more in the pipeline. We're processing, one of which was by Zach, another amazing contributor. Thank you all. Really great stuff. Keep them coming. Really excited about this new repository. Reach out if you have any questions, and we'll also be setting up some sharing is caring sessions on this to get you more involved if you have any questions. It is one of the newer opportunities to provide extensibility to Viva. Patrick, back to you.
Thanks, David. And yeah, really excited to see the pickup on the ACEs, even in the preview, and the kind of samples we're getting in there. Really awesome. So thanks everybody for contributing there. It really it's going to be neat to see what folks create with the new ACE framework. ACE. I'll call it an ACE framework. That's what we're going with today. And with that, we're going to move over to optional picture time. If folks want to turn on their cameras, I'll turn on my camera today because I got a haircut, so I'm feeling especially pretty.
There we go. So let me share my screen and let me put everybody there. 1 second. Where are you? Where are you? There we go. We're already recording. Let's see how fast we can. There's a ghost in the back row. I saw that. Now it's better. And we're filling up the seats. We're filling up the seats. I'm not going to enable my camera because we'll probably fill up the seats anyway. This is really cool. Excellent.
I'm taking Vasa's spot.
Of course you are. I think that's pretty much, yeah, now it's maxed out. Let's do some hand waving, everybody. Thanks everybody for being part of this community, and please keep the feedback coming. This is absolutely brilliant. Let us know if we can improve, if you have good ideas, and let us know. Excellent. And hopefully you will be in Las Vegas or Düsseldorf later this year. Those are the 2 in-person conferences which are happening later this year. But let's jump back on the demos. Excellent. Thank you for that one. I will process the GIF animation out of it.
Great. And with that, we're just going to flip right over to Dippin as our first demo on creating a new team using Viva Connections ACEs. So another ACE sample here we're excited to see. So Dippin, if you want to take over the presentation.
Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, respectively. I'm Dipen Shah, working at a Rapid Circle as a cloud consultant and working on the various technology in Microsoft 365 umbrella. I am the C# Corner MVP blogger and PnP contributor in the CLI Microsoft 365 CLI commands. You can reach me out at the Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, GitHub repository, and my personal email address. Today, I'm going to present a demo for the create team from the Viva dashboard using the adaptive card extensions, and the repository of this source code is under the PnP SPFx ACES. So what we are going to present over here today, overview of ACES, card view, quick view, graph API integration with ACES and card view, quick view methods to handle clicks. So what is the meaning of the adaptive card extension? So it's a framework to handle the custom development to Viva dashboard for employee experience in any devices like laptop, mobile, Android, iOS, whatever. The card view is the one component where a user land first, and from the card view, he goes and traverses the other portion of that component or adaptive card. The quick view is the basic UI functionality where user can put our business logic and put actions over there. How we do graph API integration into the ACES will show in the code, and how we handle the multiple clicks on the card view and quick view I will show you in the code. So let's go with the code walkthrough. So when we start with the SPFx adaptive card extensions code, the code structure looks like something this. Here is the one quick view folder, the card view folder, and the main file is the adaptive card extension.ts file. So into the adaptive card extension TS file, the main engine of the adaptive card is the navigator, the card view navigator and the quick view navigator. So whatever and number of the quick view and card view we want to use in our solution, then we must register it to the particular navigator engine, and it has a unique ID over there. Here I initialize the graph API instance over here, and for that I created a one service account service file over there. So into the service class, I register the multiple methods to connect with the graph and use it into from the card view and quick view section. So into the create team, I am run this method, that the graph API method call to create the team. So let me quickly go to the UI perspective and then come back to the code. Yeah, so team creation request is the my card view adaptive card extensions, and into that I use the basic card view over here. When user click on over there, then one form is popped up. So it's the quick view. And inside the quick view, I write down certain JSONs formula over there. And inside the JSONs, I put my controls where user will enter the values to create the team. So for an example, demo to PnP. So it's the first quick view. When I click on the send request, the second quick card over here, and it requests for the team, the graph API call from the quick view. And once the team is created successfully, it gives me the success message over there. So the success view is different card quick view. So let me go to the code. So I have created a 4 quick view over here, one for the success, second for the quick view, which is rendered the team creation form. The third one is the loading view. So it's the continuous process indication that the team is going creating in the progress. And the one is the error view in somehow any internet connectivity issue or permission issue. So we render the error view in and when the responses come from the graph API. Inside the card view, I have used the single button over here, and on the button click event, I call the quick view register ID. So what is the quick view register ID? It is we register on the adaptive card extension.ts file over here with the navigator. And yeah, so from the card view selection, when user click on the card, my quick view is called and it render the quick view component. So quick view.ts file over here. And here I am calling that JSON formula. So how my form look like when user want to create a theme. So inside the template, I created a template.json file. And this is the JSON payload, which is responsible for whole the scenario. Here I have declared the text box for the new theme request, input text for the display name, input text for the description, and the choice set. Inside the choice set, I have taken the default template ID for the team, which is by default given by the Microsoft. That's standard, education class, education staff, education PLC, and the retail store. And in the last, I put a submit button. So on the submit button, I want to take the value of all four fields above. So I pass the data JSON over here and get the value from the particular field when user click on the submit button. So this is the JSONs look like. What we can extend up to that, we can add more fields over here, like team should be a private or team should be a public, or the number of the owners, the owner's email address, the member's email address. So based on the requirement, we can extend these adaptive card extensions on your for your organization. And so inside the quick view, when user click on the on action on the submit button, then on action method is called, and it checks that which ID is actionable or which ID is clicked. So if it's a submit, then I quick navigator push to the loading view register ID. So loading view is the particular image where user know that yeah, the process is going start and I need to wait for certain moments. So once the loading view is there, then in the background process, what I am taking the values from the fields into the teams property, which I have created an interface for that. And I call the graph API over here. And it responds the particular true or false value. If the team is created successfully, then it gives me a true. And if request is team is not going to create successfully, then it gives me a false. So based on the response, I change the quick view again. So if the successfully team creation, I call the success view register. And if the team creation is failed, then I call the error view register ID. So inside the success view register, it's the different quick view success view.ts, and inside that I am passing the another JSON over there. So for the success, I created something like this: text box, subtitle, action submit, close, and the description. And for the error view, same thing is there, but the values should be different. So we'll get the value from the data method when the quick view is rendered on the particular card. So when success error is occurred, then into the title user plus subtitle will be error occurred while creating a team, and the description. So what should be the reason why the team creation process is failed? So the particular method that we can update dynamically. Inside the loading view template, it's a very basic JSON template where I just put the image tag over here, and the default image I put from this location. Yeah, so how I come to know that I need to create this type of the extension for the Viva dashboard. So many times in the future, Microsoft is promoting the Viva connection very briefly, and some people need to create the teams from the mobile. So how they can create? Why should they go to the particular IT team and request that please create a team for me, and these are the display name and these are the descriptions. So to avoid those communication, we can start with this type of adaptive card extensions, and manager can directly create teams from the dashboard. And yes, we can restrict the particular adaptive cards by applying the user target audience feature of the adaptive card extensions. So yeah, that's from my side. If you have any query or questions, reach out to me. Thank you so much.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much for that demo. Again, it's really exciting to see folks start to get into these ACEs and doing some samples and development and learning around that. So thank you for sharing that with us. And with that, we're going to move on to Paolo, who's going to walk us through building Microsoft Teams data dashboards with SharePoint Framework. Take it away.
Yes. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you. Yes, today we're going to talk about a sample that we just released, and which is a sample about how to create with SharePoint Framework a dashboard using tools, libraries, and techniques that we have available when developing Microsoft 365 solutions. And the overall idea of this sample is to provide developers a solution that they take inspiration from if they want to create something like that. So what's inside the sample I'm going to show you? There is a Teams personal app, which is configurable on a per user basis. We have multiple tabs in the personal app. It can be also used as a client-side web part in SharePoint Online. The UI is fully integrated with Microsoft Teams. And we also have an example of automated provisioning of artifacts like fields and lists and content in through Microsoft Graph in the Microsoft 365 workloads in order to do the setup of a set of demo items and demo content to show the output and the UI of the sample. So what are the challenges that we face developing this solution? Well, building a solution with a UI fully integrated with Microsoft Teams, as well as the capability to handle the configuration of the team personal apps. The support for multiple tabs. We need to see how you can do that whenever you want to create a SharePoint Framework solution, and how to make it configurable also in SharePoint Online and not only from the UI of Microsoft Teams, and of course the provisioning of the content. And the technical solutions that we put in place to achieve these goals are, of course, the SharePoint Framework. We use Microsoft Graph under the cover of the sample, as well as, why not, the Graph Toolkit to render the UI and to use some custom templates for a better rendering of the UI of this sample dashboard, as well as the PnP React controls together with Graph Toolkit, and of course the PnPjs as the main library to do the code-based provisioning inside the solution. To support multiple tabs, we had to create a manual manifest for Teams, and in order to support the custom configuration on a per user basis, we are relying on the application personal folder capability that we have through Microsoft Graph. So this is just to give you an idea of what we are going to briefly see in the upcoming demo. And that's why I'm now moving to the actual demo environment to show you the sample in action, and then to play with the code base. So first of all, this is the URL of the sample under the SPFx web parts repository under samples, and React Teams Lead Dashboard is the name of the new sample. In Teams, this is how the sample looks like. So you see it's a dashboard based on a set of charts, but with some content which is personal for the user. In fact, this is a personal app in Teams. You can see your calendar, you can see your task in to-do, you can see documents or items which are interesting for you. As well as you can have an additional tab for providing settings in order to configure, just for the sake of having some demo data, in order to configure lists, items, and fields in SharePoint Online, as well as eventually demo items in your calendar or in a to-do list, just for the sake of having close to real content rendering in the UI of this component hosted in Teams. Component that, of course, can be hosted also as a web part in SharePoint Online, as we all know. And if you want to configure this one in SharePoint Online, of course, you can just edit the page and use the property pane of SharePoint Online. But in the property pane of the SharePoint Framework web part in SharePoint Online, we basically have the same functionalities that we have in the Settings tab inside our sample solution. So how did we build this solution? Let me switch to Visual Studio Code. And Mainly, there is one web part which is rendered both in SharePoint Online and in Teams, and this is the lead assist dashboard web part. In this web part, in the onInit method, aside from taking care of the Teams context, so we identify if we are hosted in Teams or not. And if we are hosted in Teams, we apply the theming of Teams in order to have a proper UI consistent with the user experience of Teams. We, of course, need to get a reference to the graph client object in order to use Microsoft Graph. But we also play with one of the, I think, interesting functionalities of this sample, which is the storage of settings inside the app folder of the app in which we are. And in fact, we created a settings service class in which we use Microsoft Graph Client to talk with the app root folder of OneDrive for Business for the current application. This is an API that we have in Graph, which allows us to store in the file storage of OneDrive on a per user, per app basis, one or multiple files that we need to use for setting purposes or for whatever reason you want to have a set of files for your application. By doing that, well, we can get the settings simply by reading in the app root of our app the files, and specifically we are looking for one file which is called in our solution lead dashboard settings.json. But you can read and you can eventually write your settings if you will put the content of, for example, a JSON file into the URL of the app root folder in OneDrive. This is really useful, and the overall result will be that from a OneDrive point of view, in the apps folder of every user, there will be a subfolder representing the app. And that's interesting because we are in SharePoint Framework, and most likely we know that from a SharePoint Framework point of view, unless we use the domain isolated model, every single application will be under the same app. And in fact, we have a SharePoint Online Client Extensibility Web Application Principle, which is the name of the Azure Active Directory app under the cover of every SharePoint Framework solution, at least by default. And in there, we have our JSON file with all of our settings. Of course, if you want to have your own folder, you can create an isolated domain web part, and that will have a dedicated application. So that's one of the interesting part of the story. Moreover, when we render the application, of course, we use MGT, so we register a provider of MGT from authentication point of view, which is the SharePoint provider, in order to use the context of SPFx. And we also configure PnPjs because we use that one as well. In the rendering, we just rely on a React component, which is this one. And in this component, at the very end, aside from loading through a data service all of the content that we want to render, and the data service will rely on PnPjs and Graph to read all of the data that we need. But in the component, when we do the actual rendering, we simply render a dashboard control of PnP controls. And in that one, we configured all of the widgets, so all of the sections of the dashboard, in order to have the chart control of PnP controls, for example. So this method will simply give us back a chart control of PnP controls, as well as we can eventually use, if I go back, we can eventually use the MGT components, like in this widget, where we say get my day tab, and this one will give you back the agenda MGT component, the Microsoft Graph Toolkit component, with a set of custom templates that we defined right here in this file, in order to have a custom rendering for all of the items that we want to see in the rendering of the agenda. And the same applies for the to-do list. So this is to give you an idea of what you can do when you want to create a solution with a nice UI, fully integrated with Teams, based on all of the components that we have. But there is more. We wanted to have 2 tabs in our personal app. And that's why in the Teams folder of our solution, we manually created a manifest. And in there, we configured 2 different static tabs. One targeting the lead ACES dashboard that we just saw, and another one targeting the settings web part, which is the one providing the buttons to configure and to set up the solution. And in order to do that in SPFx, you simply need to manually create a manifest. You have to zip the manifest and the icons into a file called Teams SPFx app.zip, which is well documented on docsmax.com. You leave this file in the Teams folder, and when you will build and package your SharePoint Framework solution, well, this zip file will be embedded in the SPPKG file, so that when you will do the upload of your SharePoint Framework package solution into the app catalog, and you will click on Sync to Teams, the engine on the server side, on the SharePoint Online side of the story, will recognize that you have a custom zip file and will use that one to register your application in Teams, rather than creating on the fly a manifest and registering every single web part that you have configured to be available in a team personal app. So this is yet another interesting functionality that we have in SharePoint Framework whenever we want to create more complex solutions which do not rely on a single web part, but rely on multiple web parts, which will become multiple tabs in your solution. Again, and furthermore, talking about what we did, we are using MGT. So in the package.json file, we are referencing the NGT React in the NGT SPFx packages, because we want to have a full integration of MGT inside SharePoint Framework. And that's why we can then say in the web part that we register the provider, the SharePoint provider, as the global provider for MGT. So this is just to give you an idea of what is quite easily doable using all the rich components and controls that we have available through PnP and through Microsoft, in order to easily create a real or a close to real solution hosted in Teams and SharePoint Online. You also have some references on the slide deck, which I'm going to share also in the chat, if I can talk and copy and paste at the same time. Let me see if I can do that. Yes. Looks like I can. So here is a list of useful links that you can keep into account if you want to dig into the topics that we saw. For example, the idea of using the custom settings stored in the uproot folder comes from a blog post by Valdek, which shared this brilliant idea of using this functionality for storing settings, as well as you can find links to all the other libraries and tools that we are using in this solution. And I think that's all for me, Patrick, so back to you. Thank you.
Fantastic, Paolo. That's a really fully realized sample demo there. Lots of stuff for folks to learn in that code. Certainly encourage everybody to check that out, try that out. Just great stuff. So thank you, Paolo, for sharing that with us. And last but not least, we're on to Hugo for SPFx Design Patterns Asynchronous Rendering.
Awesome.
Take it away, Hugo.
Let me share my screen. Hi, everyone. I'm Hugo, and what we thought we'd start doing is we thought we'd start doing some regular sessions called SPFx Design Pattern sessions on these calls. And the goal here is that we're constantly innovating and improving the SharePoint framework, and we want to make sure that everyone is familiar with some of the best practices, some of the design patterns. So sometimes we're going to cover some materials that you may already be familiar with, but we want to make sure that everybody is kind of brought to the same level. What I would love is your feedback at the end of this session. My Twitter account is here, and also my blog for some reason. So feel free to tweet at me to let me know what kind of sessions you'd like to see. And of course, I appreciate the heart signs and the applaud signs and things like that, just so we understand, hey, are we doing the right thing? Today, we're going to be talking about asynchronous rendering. It's one of my favorite topics. And here's why, right? There is a plague that's affecting millions of users every day, right? It costs organizations lots of money just due to loss of productivity. And it reduces user engagement. It makes people feel that their system is buggy and slow. And, you know, that's right. We're talking about slow web parts. And not only just slow web parts, we're also talking about slow web part pages, slow ACEs, slow Teams applications. And people will often blame, you know, the system when it's really probably just a matter of how we're rendering the web part. So let's talk about that. So the first thing that you get when you build a kind of a web part out of the box is something called synchronous rendering, right? So the out of the box web part that you get when you use the fancy wizard, the Yeoman generator, it will create a web part that will have a render method. And the render method, all you're supposed to do in the render method is you're supposed to create the HTML that you want to render, and then you're supposed to inject it into the page. Right? Now you can actually put some dynamic stuff in there. Like for example, if you want to look at some of the properties that have been set on the web part, instead of passing a hard-coded string here, you could do that. Now the problem is, what if I'm trying to do synchronous rendering but with data, right? So I'm calling data and I don't have control over how long it will take. So let's take the same example here, and I'm just going to use the same render method. But this time, I'm going to be calling some kind of fancy method out there that returns results. Maybe it's calling an API, maybe it's calling a website or something like that. But the problem is, this is synchronous. So while you're doing this, the web part is going, all right, I'm going to wait for you before I can render anything. And then once it gets the results, then it'll render the HTML and, you inject it to the page like you would normally do. Now let's look at what that does on a page. So here I have a web part. Well, this is just an out-of-the-box web part, but if I just show you, if I refresh the page here, and I hope that, yeah, give me a second. My gulp serve has actually died while we're doing this. I swear I had that ready just before the call. So I'm just starting the gulp serve on my browser page here so I can show the web part. But what I did while we're waiting for this to kick in is I created the web part that I'll be sharing in a second, where I'm being obnoxiously slow, right? I'm not me, but the web part. I'm actually injecting a wait that will make the web part really, really slow, and it's synchronous. So that means that the web part itself is going to wait before it returns results. We're almost there. Of course, it decided to stop as I was about to present. All right, I should be ready to reload now. Okay, so if I start this again, I take just the out-of-the-box web part. All right, you see the picture web part is actually pretty fast. Now, if I add my synchronous web part, one of the things that you'll notice is that, well, the first time I add it, it seems like, is this broken? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was, because it's code that I wrote. But this is not code. This is not an issue with the code that I wrote. This is an issue with how long it's taking to retrieve the results. And if I refresh the page, let's just do this. Now, when the web part is added, it's actually going to do something like this, where it's like, okay, the web part is stopping pretty much the whole page from rendering in time. And of course, I'm exaggerating the results here, but this is actually what it does in tiny little increments throughout your sites, throughout your teams. You're injecting web parts that could potentially slow down your application. So how do we fix that? Well, let's go back to my fancy slides. We can actually use something called asynchronous rendering. So asynchronous rendering, the only thing that you need to do really is you need to actually go in and say, okay, so this method is asynchronous. And asynchronous, if you're not familiar with the term, right, it means that we're not trying to keep things in sync. We're just we're going to launch something and we're not going to wait for it to come back. We'll just handle later when it comes back, we'll handle it separately. That way, everything else can continue moving forward and everything seems to be more performant. So the web part needs to return a promise. In this case, it's a void promise, like many people that I know. And then one of the things that I'm going to do here is I'm going to render just this little spinny thing, just to show you kind of, hey, we're busy right now. We'll get our data, and that's the part that takes long. But you'll notice that we make a wait statement. So we're saying this is asynchronous. wait for this to come back, and then give me the results. And then, just like before, we'll just render the results. Now, the problem is, in the documentation, one of the things that it says is the web part will wait an indeterminate amount of time before it renders. Now, what I think that means behind the scenes is I think it's Vesa is hitting F5 once in a while just to refresh your web part. And that means that your web part may, while it's going to be faster than the first web part, it's not necessarily going to be as fast as it could be. Now, there is a way that you can tell your web part, or you can tell SharePoint or Teams or Viva, this web part is going to render asynchronously, and I'm going to let you know when I'm ready. If you go look at the documentation on docs.microsoft.com, you'll see that the base web part class has an isRenderAsync method, and it's a property, so you just return true or false. And it says, now there is something that you need to do though. If you do say isRenderAsync is true, SharePoint is not going to wait for, it's just going to continue. And it's expecting you to call a method called renderCompleted, I think. But we'll see it on the next slide. So that's why I don't need to remember it. So, okay, so the first thing that I'm doing is I'm saying isRenderAsync is true. Then I do the same thing I did before. I do the little spinny thing. I call my method. In this case, I hide the little spinny thing because I was getting fancy. I render the web part, and then once I'm done, I actually tell SharePoint render is completed, and that will kind of force it to kind of realize, oh, okay, that means I should be faster. Now, let me take the exact same web part that we had before, and it's going to be slow. And we'll talk about that in a second, but because again, I was trying to be obnoxiously slow in terms of how to render this web part. So let's refresh the page without the web part. Let's add the same web part as before, except this time it's going to be asynchronous rendering. You'll notice that right away the web part starts doing stuff, but it's just not rendering data. Right, and that's fine. Like we'll talk in a separate session how to handle, weights and things like that. But the great thing about this is if I refresh the page, you'll see everything else renders really, really quickly, and then the web part renders. And when it gets around to getting the results, and again, I've hard-coded the weight here. When it gets around to getting the results, it renders properly. Now, I'll skip you the weight here. Here's the thing, though. And we need to talk about this because, if you look at all the awesome samples that we have out there, we have probably some of the top minds in the SharePoint industry or whatever you want to call it, and amazing samples out there. Of the thousands of samples that we have across the various repos, there's actually 2 samples that use the async rendering method. So it's just one of those things that either people are not aware of, or it's not documented properly. And the thing is, progress indicators make slow systems feel less insufferable, right? So if I have a web part that does nothing, and I'm not telling people, hey, I'm about to render, then people will think the system is slow. SharePoint is slow, it's buggy, Teams is slow. And so using progress indicators and showing the users that there's something happening has a lot of advantages. One of the things is that it reassures the users that the system is actually working, and it actually reduces the user's uncertainty. It also gives the user something to look at while waiting, right? And I know that little spinny thing is annoying, but we'll talk about that later. It also offers users a reason to wait for the system to finish, because it says, hey, I'm doing something, I'm going to be giving you results soon enough. And it can actually reduce the user's perception of time. And users actually devote some cognitive resources to the feedback itself, and they pay less attention to the wait. And if you haven't attended the session that David and I do at a lot of conferences, it's I can't remember what it's called, but it's the micro animation session. We actually do demonstrate that, where we show 2 things happening at the exact same time, the exact same duration. One has animations, one doesn't. and every single attendee thinks, hey, this web part was actually a lot faster. It's not. It just feels that way. Now, the human eye can detect, or the human brain can detect delays as short as 1/10 of a second. So anything that takes longer than that doesn't feel instant. So the rule here is anything that's a second or more is enough to actually interrupt the person's conscious thought process. So what do? Anything that's less than 10 seconds, and 10 seconds sounds like a lot, and it is a lot nowadays, but anything that 10 seconds or less should be at least using a looped progress indicator. And now there's all sorts of rules about how many times you loop that will actually make people feel that the system is slow versus fast. But again, we'll talk about that in a separate session. Now, if your thing is going to take longer than 10 seconds, one of the things that you can do is like a percent done progress indicator, which may or may not be hard to do in your situation. But you want people to understand that, hey, I'm not just hung here, I'm not just frozen, I'm actually making progress. And one of the rules that I would say is please don't ever put a button that says, or a message that says, don't push this button again, we got you covered. That's probably the worst thing to do. So one of the things that we'll talk about here is, and I know I'm running out of time, but the Fluent UI user interface has something called the Shimmer interface. We're not going to cover it today, but investigate this because the Shimmer interface allows you to actually render a temporary user interface that makes the user think, okay, this is almost there. The data is almost loaded. And in a lot of cases, users don't even notice that you actually are rendering a shimmer. So it makes the system feel faster, even though it's not necessarily faster. All right, let me wrap this up. We have a couple samples out there. If you want to see good examples of how to use the render async, you have the Microsoft Graph People Search web part, and we have the HTML templating web part out there in the SPFx web part repository that shows these concepts. Again, I'm looking for feedback, so please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at BernieH. I'll monitor the chat, but that's it for me. Back to you, Patrick.
All right, thank you so much for that wonderful demo. Performance is a very important thing in every application. So step one is improving that performance, and step two is providing a good experience when loads are a little bit longer. So fantastic summary there and some great patterns for folks to follow in their solutions. Thank you, everybody, for joining the call. The recording will be available in about 24 hours on our community video channel. You can follow us at those addresses there on Twitter. Our next SPFx call will be in 2 Thursdays on October 21st at 7 a.m. Pacific, and the next general dev call will be next Thursday, October 14th at 7 a.m. Pacific. All the community calls are, of course, available at that link we talked about earlier, ak.ms/m365PnP. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. There's some other calls you can always attend if you are interested, and as well, you can catch up on the recordings if you can't make them live. Thank you to everybody for joining the call today. Thank you to all our presenters, and that's Dippin, Paolo, and Hugo. As a reminder, and just thank you to everybody, and we'll talk soon. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.